Joe. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Next Step speaker series. We're so excited that you could all attend tonight. My name is Ryan Zaccaro. I'm the director of the Next Steps transition program at the Ideal School. So it's a transition program that focuses on life skills and independence for students who are generally between 18 and 21 years old. We're so excited for the second year of our speaker series, which brings in experts in their fields, and they present on topics that are super valuable for students who are transitioning into adulthood. And we're so grateful for our continued partnership with JobPath, who will be leading tonight's presentation on Introduction to Adult Services. Before I introduce our speaker for tonight, I just wanted to let you all know that our second speaker series date will be on Thursday, November 3rd, and will be led by James Traylor from Upstate Special Needs Planning. So he'll be speaking about maximizing benefits for people with disabilities. But for tonight, I'm really excited to introduce you all to Kevin Crooks from JobPath. Kevin has worked with the disability community in a variety of roles for more than 10 years in arts programs, residential settings, and with the Minneapolis public school system. Since 2016, he has worked in employment services at JobPath, where he is currently the program manager of transition services, supporting young people just starting out in their careers. JobPath is dedicated to a person-centered approach with an emphasis on customized employment, creating positions that capitalize on individuals' needs, interests, and strengths. Kevin earned his BA at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, where he studied history and philosophy. So without further ado, I just want to thank Kevin for joining us tonight and pass it along to him to get started.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate it. Really happy to be here. And yes, I've been at JobPath for coming up on 7 years, working in employment, as Ryan was saying. And this is my colleague, Amy, if you can see Amy there, and she might chime in also because she has been there even longer and is a great wealth of knowledge. So I'm going to share my screen and begin a slide deck here. Okay, does that look good to everyone? Ryan, does that look good?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'll start out by talking just a little bit about JobPath, and then move on to discuss two of the main New York State bureaucratic institutions that you will want to be that you'll have to work with and get eligibility from to secure services for your child. The first of which is OPWDD, New York's Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, and the second of which is ACCES-VR, which is also an acronym that I'm blanking on right now. But we will then talk a little bit about adult services of different kinds with an emphasis on employment. And, so employment and day services and supported living being the three big buckets of services we'll focus on. And then we will drill down into customized employment a little bit, which is the style or method of supported employment that we specialize in at JobPath. So, great. JobPath has been around for coming up on 45 years in New York, supporting people with disabilities. We have a very person-centered approach, as Ryan mentioned in the intro, and really believe that anyone who wants to work or live independently or contribute to their community should be able to do that regardless of the support level they need. And we focus on those three kind of buckets of services like I was referring to earlier: supported employment, community connections, which is what we call our day services, and supported living. So we will get into each of those a little more. And also about JobPath, briefly, we are located in Midtown, and we work with primarily folks from every borough but Staten Island, we will work with people from Staten Island at jobs that are in, say, Manhattan, but just to give a sense of our scope, we work in those 4 boroughs primarily. So why are these two? These are two of the big, does this go away? Yeah, here, fine, okay. These are two of the big bureaucratic, New York State bureaucratic entities that I was talking about that are the sort of gateway to a variety of services. The first of which is OPW. So OPWDD is a source of a variety of services beyond employment. So it is, you need Medicaid in order to get eligibility for OPWDD services, which we call waiver services. And we will get into how to get eligibility in a minute. But once you have those waiver services, OPWDD provides funding for employment, day services, supported living, and more. It is a really long application process. It can take a couple of years. And so with OPWDD especially, we emphasize starting early. And you can't really get it too early. So it is something we encourage people to do, as soon as they're able to, because if you wait until your child is about to graduate, you will find, the process takes a while. There are often hiccups that can prolong everything. You need like evaluations that have an expiration date. So if you get an evaluation and continue with the process and hit a snag, and before you know it, that first evaluation is no longer relevant and you need to update it. So it can just be really a headache, time consuming. And so, yeah, we encourage people to get eligibility as soon as they can, and certainly well before their child graduates. And Medicaid's required. ACCES-VR is more employment oriented. It is employment oriented. It is also New York State, and it is required for most employment programs like JobPath. In order to, receive employment services from JobPath, you need to have an open access VR case, and that covers the first chunk of this is 90 days. It actually now is a little longer than that, like 4 or 5 months, but it covers the first chunk of employment, and then they close the access case and it transitions to OPWDD. But in summary, OPWDD is for a wider variety of services, and it's a very long application process. ACCES-VR is employment specific, shorter, even though it can still be difficult, not as bad an application process or as lengthy of one, and it's required for most employment programs. So yes, OPWDD eligibility takes a long time to get. You need Medicaid. You need to have Medicaid to begin with, and there are a lot of sources that can help guide you through the process of
I think we may have lost Kevin for a sec. Let's see.
Give me 1 second, Ryan. Let me see.
Sure.
Hmm.
Oh, hi, Kevin. You're muted.
I don't know how that happened, and I apologize.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Okay. Sorry about that. Great. Okay. Yes. Diagnosis before so the last thing I said was like everyone here probably will have no problem with the diagnosis before 22, right? That was heard. Yep. Great. Thanks. And yeah, hold on to evaluations and documents that are proof of disability, because it can come in handy later on. A psychological evaluation, psychosocial evaluation, an autism evaluation if your child has autism. These can be done through a number. These evaluations can be sought out through a number of organizations like AHRC and YAI. And they can be a great resource in scheduling those and getting those. But and again, with every step of this, there can be hiccups. So like those, AHRC is great and can be a wonderful resource, but also it can be, there can be challenges in scheduling an eval or getting the paperwork afterward or whatever it is. So just, something to keep in mind with this whole thing is that it is a lengthy process with many, that often has many challenges associated with it. A physical is another required thing, just sort of a simple, review from a physician. An eligibility transmittal form is an OPWDD specific document you can get on their website. So over the course of quite a while, maybe a year, maybe a little longer, you will go through these different evaluations and steps. And when you have everything and are closing in on having eligibility, you will need to find a care manager, which used to be called an MSC, Medicaid Service Coordinator. And a care manager, there are 3 major care manager organizations in New York City called Advanced Care Alliance, Care Design, and Tri-County Care. And those are the 3 main. You'll want to contact them, probably all of them, and as part of like research, and get a care manager. And that person will be responsible, once you have OPWDD eligibility, that person will be responsible for managing all of your services. So, if a person maybe starts out, your son or daughter starts out with employment services and then later on decides they want to live independently, and there are different options for what independent living can look like. So all of that is orchestrated and kind of done with the council and collaboration of the care manager. And when you find one, as you're finding one, you want to do research and learn about the different organizations, talk to people at those 3 care coordination organizations I mentioned, ACA, Tri-County, and Care Design. And then you're up and running with OPW. And that is huge. That's a very big deal because it is the gateway to so many services. ACCES-VR is a simpler process, and it is employment specific. You have to be 14, have a disability that, quote, interferes with getting and keeping a job, and be in New York City. That should, or I guess, sorry, you don't need to be in New York City for ACCES. That's a statewide thing. But, for us, it's New York City. Yeah, so you need to be in New York. That requires documentation, so proof of disability, which can be an IEP or a psych eval, and another medical or the same medical if it isn't too old, and then personal documents, Social Security, birth certificate, state ID, SSI or SSDI award letter. And that is a speedier and less complicated application process than OPW, but there can also be hiccups there. But there isn't as much of a need to start as early as possible. This can be done closer to, graduation or getting a job. And then you will have an ACCES-VR, you will have a counselor, VRC, vocational rehab counselor, who will work with an organization. They will refer a person to an organization like JobPath. They'll refer your son or daughter to an organization, and you can express preferences if you know you want to work with JobPath, for example. And so we will, the Employment Services Agency will implement the employment services, and ACCES-VR is sort of a mediating entity there. So you need that you need ACCES-VR eligibility in order to receive services from JobPath, for example. So with with OPWDD, the longer process that isn't specific to employment, these are the main services that you will have access to and be eligible for when you have that eligibility. So employment, day services, and supported living, and then other things that are, other ancillary services that we can get into in Q&A if anyone wants to. So our emphasis at JobPath is on employment, and so I'm going to go over the other ones first. DayHab and ComHab, or Community Habilitation, are different ways for an individual to have a personalized set of activities that they are doing in the community or at home to focus on, achieving certain goals that they have. So when you have OPWDD eligibility, you get a care manager. One of the things you develop with your care manager is a life plan, which is a lengthy document that goes over a wide variety of facets of a person's life, from like their physical health to how they spend their free time, their school, if they're a student, their, all sorts of things. And it outlines the specific services that you are that you want and are pursuing. So, for example, if you have someone who has supported employment services and lives independently in an OPWDD subsidized housing, those would be the two. There's a part of the life plan that would have those. So they have employment services and they have supported living services. These are okay. So, and then in the life plan, it outlines different goals an individual has, and those goals are relevant to what they would do in day services, in DayHab or ComHab. So traditional DayHab involves going to usually an organization's office, and there is so it's individualized goals that they're working on in a group setting. So yeah, it's a group of people in an office. You go as a group to maybe, you go on outings in the community, you focus on skill building, you do activities in that DayHab setting, and that is traditional DayHab. It primarily is based out of an agency's headquarters. And then DayHab Without Walls is sort of a variation on that is not as rooted in the being in the offices. So I mean, with the offices in particular, with traditional DayHab here, it in a lot of ways emulates a school schedule. It's a place that there's a lot of routine involved. These are the virtues of it. There's a lot of routine involved. There's a lot of kind of long-term social relationships that you're developing. You go to a place, you spend the day there, you come home. So those are sort of the merits of traditional DayHab. The second one here, DayHab Without Walls, isn't based in an agency's office, and instead you work with a direct support professional, a DSP, on those same individualized goals. So instead of taking a class about financial skills and financial management in at some agency's office, you would maybe work individually with your DSP on financial skills, for example. And then community, and also for DayHab Without Walls, you can do stuff that is, it's very recreational. You can go to, if your goal is to go to museums in the city or explore cooking, or whatever it is, you can do a wide variety of things. And ComHab is also a one-on-one way to receive support, often focused on daily living skills, often in the home. So laundry, chores, things like that. Supported living, I am running a little long, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. So supported living is, there are a lot of different ways that can look. It can be very independent and involve a person living in an apartment subsidized by OPWDD, where they have maybe a ComHab staff person coming by 2 days a week to check in, talk about some, their goals, for example, and that, that's sort of the most independent version of that. A paid neighbor is similar, where a person lives in an apartment and someone regularly is checking in with them. Family care is, and some of these I am not as knowledgeable about the details, so I'm going to just breeze over these a little bit. But family care is reimbursement for, maybe a person can even live with, your child could live at home with you, and there's a possibility of getting reimbursement for the house, room and board. Supported IRAs are houses, an apartment maybe with a couple people, and also a DSP who is supporting them at that site, often like a live-in person. And so that is there's more kind of built-in support there. And then a group home tends to be the most kind of support, the most wraparound services built into the living environment, with maybe an RN on staff and a bunch of, larger number of people in, on one floor of an apartment building or something like that. Supported employment, which we focus on. So yeah, supported employment, again, you need that for the long-term support, you need OPWDD eligibility. And for short-term, like to start out, you need an open ACCES-VR case. And there are different agencies that'll provide employment services in different ways. For example, it could look at some agencies, it might look like helping a person apply online to job postings online, for example. At JobPath, we really focus on customized employment, which is different than a traditional labor market approach. Customized employment, there's like a page on the Department of Labor's website. It is a real, like, valid, official, recognized thing, alternative to traditional employment, that involves seeking accommodations from an employer and tailoring a job to the needs of the employer and the strengths of the individual, the employee. So that is what we focus on. And then, but some agencies do provide a more traditional labor market approach to employment services. It doesn't need to be customized depending on what agency you're at. Job coaching is another foundational aspect of supported employment. When you have the job, you will have a coach, and depending on the support needs of the individual, that person might be there all the time for every shift. If the person has more complex support needs and needs a coach there, or it might be, a coach checking in a couple times a month to see how things are going, and emailing periodically with a manager, or something in between. But that is another part of it. And yeah, to the customization, which again is what JobPath focuses on. It's especially person-centered, based on the strengths, interests, and support needs of the individual. Our process, to go through it sort of briefly, is that when we bring people into our program, we engage in what we call a discovery process, where we get to know the person. We do a wide variety of activities with the individual. If the person is regularly, doing different activities in their life, we will participate in those and see what their day hab program is like. Or if they volunteer on the weekends, we'll go see what their volunteering gig is like. We'll talk with people in their lives, family, previous employers if they have that, the person who runs that volunteer gig that I mentioned. So just talking to people, a therapist perhaps. All of this is with the consent of the individual, of course. So if someone is comfortable with it, a therapist, whatever it is. You gather a lot of, and also we do activities that the person has never done before. So maybe a person is interested in cats. I have a relationship with a volunteer cat cafe in Brooklyn where, they let us come and volunteer, and you just get to be like in a room with 30 cats, cleaning litter, cleaning up after the cats, and also just engaging with cats. Like, that's a fun thing that a person has maybe never done. that's part of the discovery process. So after a lot of, months, often we try to average it out, around 3 months, depending on the availability of the individual and other factors, we begin the job development process. We have a big meeting with the individual, usually family, anyone else they want to invite, called a planning meeting, where we go through all of the things we learned in discovery and craft a plan for what kind of jobs we are going to be pursuing. We pursue those jobs. That's job development. We do that in a variety of ways. So because JobPath really focuses on customized employment, we don't usually just go on a website and apply for whatever is available at Target. We will reach out to managers at different types of institutions and businesses, organizations, and try to kind of foster relationships with managers and introduce them to this concept of customized employment, and working with them come up with specific jobs that are tailored to their needs and the strengths and interests of the individual I'm supporting, and that is how we come up with the job. So and then we provide support and coaching. So I'm going to use a couple examples to try to illustrate that. So El Rio Grande is a restaurant on East 38th Street, and we work with someone there who, at the time that she was starting out with us, she had a little bit of restaurant experience doing sort of not like as a server, but doing other sort of miscellaneous tasks at the restaurant. She didn't have an especially strong interest in what kind of job she was looking for, and she really likes organization and sort of organizing and categorization. And so we already had a relationship with the company that owns this and another restaurant. So, sometimes it's a circuitous path that leads you to the employer. But basically, we ended up working at this restaurant with the woman I support doing liquor inventory. So she has like a handheld device and scans bottles. They have 2 bars. So like scans bottles, cleans bottles, also tracks unopened bottles in the a storage room, like a liquor room, and tracks everything. It's a very fun environment. She really likes the people there. She likes the sort of precision and tracking of the work. She's not like into alcohol per se, but it's an exam, and the location worked well for her. The hours we were like the schedule worked well. It's a part-time job, and so we were able to just get a lot of factors lined up right. And that's it was a really interesting job that we weren't like anticipating going into the process that she's now had for years and is really successful in. Another example is a dog and cat grooming boarding facility business in Red Hook called Woofs and Whiskers. And this is a person I supported who loves cats, also likes dogs, but really loves cats, has cats, and wanted to work with them, but didn't really like working around people so much. So we had to have a job that didn't involve interacting with strangers, relatively limited interaction with people in general, so we were looking for something where there could be a couple of people, manager or whatever, who could be the like point person who was, familiar with this, individual, but the individual didn't have to like do stuff with their coworkers often. They didn't have to work in conjunction with other people because that's not something they wanted to do. A lot of social anxiety. So yeah, more individualized tasks is what he was looking for. And so we found a job working with the cats in particular, cleaning the litter boxes and stuff at night, like late late evening, night, so that there were not many people in the facility, there were not any customers, and really had the space mostly to himself to do his job while listening to something on his phone, listening to music or whatever, podcasts or whatever. And that worked out really well for him with just being around cats, because he would work very hard. He still does this. He works very hard, and then he'll take a break for a minute and just like pet a cat. If there's a cat that is social and likes that, and it's just a really great fit with the tasks, the social dynamic or the social orientation of the whole job. Yeah, that was really good. And the time of day was a big part of it. That was, wouldn't work for a lot of people. A lot of people don't want to be, a lot of people we work with don't want to be taking a train at 10 or 11 p.m. or whatever, and that's fine. But this worked out really well for him. The Transit Museum, a wonderful place, truly wonderful place. You should go if you haven't been in the last couple of years. It's excellent. And we have someone who works there who works on the platform and on the floor, like interacting with customers, guests, and talks, answers general questions and answers quite specific questions about like the trains on the platform. And if you don't know, the museum is in a former train station in Brooklyn, that decommissioned subway station, so it's underground, and it's like, it's like one of the 2-floor type of stations where there's an up top and then you go down. And when you go down to where the tracks are, they just have, I don't know, 15 maybe old trains there. So trains that are, subway cars that are 100 years old, some that are, 50 years old. They go through time, so they'll have different subway cars from, further and further back in time. He knows an enormous amount of information about the different models and all sorts of stuff, and he loves sharing it. That was just such a great fit for him with the subject matter, a very supportive environment in terms of coworkers. And it's been really wonderful. It's been one of the most satisfying or gratifying placements I have ever had. It's really great. None of these are clerical jobs, but that's another thing. A lot of people like working in an office. I work with someone who relatively recently started a job in a small law firm in Throgs Neck, where he lives. And one of the biggest priorities for him was something that was close to home. And, there are businesses in Throgs Neck, obviously, but it is, not like a hub of commerce or business, it's not like Midtown. And so that was trickier than people who have, than it is for people who have a wider, range of where they're comfortable traveling to for work. And so a lot of work was put into that, and we found this job, and the tasks, which are, oriented around like organizing files and stuff, clerical assistance type tasks, work extremely well for him. The location and hours are tailored to him and where he lives and his preferences, and the tasks are too. It's really, really wonderful. So those are some examples of customization and some of the different sort of axes along which you can customize in terms of social environment, tasks, time of day, days of week, number of hours, all and more. And I guess I can wrap up there and open things up for questions. Yeah, does that sound good? Ryan, you there?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. Yeah, all right. So if anyone has any questions, I'm
a few questions for
you. Yeah,
you.
great.
So in terms of getting a care manager, it's the responsibility of the families to reach out to the 3 care coordination organizations to get one, or does OPWDD kind of just assign one, or do you have to seek it out?
So Amy, if you can corroborate this, I believe.
Wait, your Amy or my Amy?
Oh, I meant my Amy, but sure, go.
Okay.
I mean, sure, I believe. Yeah. No. Yeah. Anyone can chime in. Yeah. I think that is true that you have to reach out.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody, Amy or otherwise.
No, you're correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry.
No, thank you. Yeah, so, you know, that is not, I have not worked very intimately with that step of the process. So I'm not sure if there are some resources, if you ask OPW for like, you know, I don't know, advice or how to pursue that. I bet you could probably get some kind of direction from them, but yeah, it is the responsibility of the individual / their family to reach out.
May I say something, participant Amy?
Okay.
I recently did this and I'm working with another friend who's doing this. You can just call one of the 3 agencies. There's usually an intake coordinator, and you can actually try to connect with someone at one of the 3 agencies before you even apply to OPWDD. And the benefit of that is if you send your paperwork into an agency, they can submit it to OPWDD on your behalf and they can track it. So I made the mistake of sending something, was it priority mail? And it was over President's Day weekend. And somehow the post office tried to deliver to a federal building that was closed on President's Day weekend. And my application was lost in the mail, which was very disappointing because it had every single personal piece of information you could have for a person on there. So I highly recommend trying to connect with one of the care agencies before you even apply, just so that you don't have to have your kid's application lost, because that was rather tragic.
I work with someone who, yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. I work with someone whose mother only speaks Cantonese. And so that was an example of where shopping around at different agencies proved really helpful, finding a care manager that was bilingual and available, you know, had space on their caseload. So that's another example. Yeah. Did you mention, Ryan, did you say you had a couple of questions?
Yeah, I just had one more about some ACCES-VR stuff. So you mentioned how after 4 to 5 months, supported employment transitions from ACCES-VR to OPWDD. So when that happens, does the individual's job change, or does it start to look different? Or is it really just a continuation of the same services, just that the funding is taken over by someone else?
Yeah, more the latter. The job doesn't change. I mean, the job can change at any point if the employer wants that and it works for the individual, you know, like it's, you know, the job doesn't have to look the exact same after 90 days of employment if some other arrangement seems more suitable. But yeah, no, it's mostly just a baton passing to a different funder, and there's no interruption of service. Like, for example, if you're working with JobPath, you know, we would, yeah, there's no interruption of employment services, and there's just paperwork to fill out, some signatures from the participant that would be needed, but it is smooth on their end. That transition is pretty frictionless on their end. One other thing, just apropos, I mean, I forgot to mention is that I mentioned that OPW eligibility is time consuming to pursue. And I also want to highlight that JobPath, where we do very individualized work that I think is especially helpful for people with more complex support needs, or people whose support needs just aren't as compatible with an agency that's applying for stuff online. One byproduct of that is we do have a pretty significant wait list. And it is hard, you know, at any given time, hard for us to identify the exact like time the wait list represents, like a year wait. But it sometimes is more than a year. I think right now we would say the wait list is more than a year, probably. And that's another thing to do early. So if you are interested, for example, in working with JobPath, you would want to reach out well in advance and get on the wait list. And then, you know, our intake coordinator
I can pick up till it comes back. Her name is Carol Ann Granada, but we'd be happy to, you know, share that contact with you, Ryan, if people are interested. Yeah.
Great. So Amy, if someone were interested in working with JobPath, is the best way to go through ACCES-VR and have their coordinator through ACCES-VR reach out to JobPath?
Yeah, you know, so usually going through talking to our intake coordinator, and then she'll to get onto the wait list. You have to be in ACCES-VR. So and then we, so ACCES-VR has every borough has their own office, and so you go to the borough. You go to the office in your borough, and as Kevin was saying, you get connected to a counselor. So like we could help navigate that process if people needed help with that. But that's how our initial funding, except for employment services, most likely comes through ACCES-VR first, and then moves into OPW. Yeah.
Thank you.
I know I got interrupted. I'm now audible, right? You can see and hear me,
Yeah.
and I'm no longer sharing my screen. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Amy, for covering for me. Yeah, other questions that come up that folks have about eligibility or what the employment services look like at JobPath?
Well, I had a question. My name is Stephanie Evans, and I'm just one of the parents. And I think Ryan asked the question because I was under the impression that JobPath and VCR are separate. They're two separate job training or job access places. So you have to go through Access VCR to get to JobPath.
They are. Yeah, no, you're right that they're separate, and you're right that you have to do that sequence of steps. You have to go to ACCES-VR, open a case there. That is run by the state of New York. And from there, you can pursue employment services at a variety of different nonprofit agencies like JobPath. So yes, JobPath would be one example. There are many options. There's only one ACCES-VR. So kind of whichever option you want to choose for, ultimately, you have to start with ACCES-VR. Open that case,
Okay.
And then yeah, JobPath or other service agencies are what you could look in. And that's another area where research is helpful, reaching out to intake coordinators at different organizations, talking to your access counselor about their experience. What have you, from your perspective, has this agency seemed good to work with and like good for the people who get referred there? So yeah, research is always really helpful if people have the time and resources to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't work together. I mean, like AHRC, YAI, Goodwill, there's many agencies that are doing employment work. And we actually have a consortium for customized employment that we all come together. So, I just say that there are options out there, as Kevin said, and there's a lot more people doing customized employment now than there were. So yeah, just looking around and sort of doing the research is really a very good idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for doing this. This is Jane
Of course.
Providenti. Just a question. So for the ACCES-VR application, did you include like a link in your presentation or anything? Because sometimes when you go onto these government websites, they kind of send you all over and you don't really know where the application is. Is there a certain thing, link you could send us, or is it already included perhaps?
It's not included. I could definitely send that to Ryan, who I assume could then send it out. But with regard specifically to the ACCES-VR, I think if you Google here, I'll do it right now, but I think that getting the application is not as
Andrew
difficult
Harris, who's on the call, just put a link in the chat.
Great.
That looks like
Thank you.
it's to apply for VR services.
Oh, that's great. Can you send that around, Ryan? I don't think I could access the chat.
Yep.
Thank you.
Also, I Googled like access, NY ACCES-VR application, and it sends me to the page that has the application link itself and other sort of contextual information about the application process. So it isn't that's not the hardest part of the bureaucratic navigation, fortunately, for that.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Of course.
Can you talk a little about autistic people who are interested in technology, is that going to be a hard fit, or are there enough things happening in technology that someone who's verbal and is able to do some work in that field? My son is doing some stuff with TKU right now, Tech Kids Unlimited, and he's going to be looking for technology when he gets a little older.
Well, I don't have a lot of firsthand experience working with people in like software engineering or like very high tech type of positions. Certainly, you know, we work with a lot of people who have strong computer skills that usually get directed in more of a office job type direction. Like, you know, I work with someone in the billing department at a major like ad agency, and he does like spreadsheet stuff and formulas for Excel and stuff. So there's but not like coding or anything. Yeah, so Amy, do you have any other thoughts about that?
I was just going to say, I mean, the thing about customized employment, that's just such why we like it so much, though, is that it like really builds on the skills like that your son would have. So it's not like trying to fit somebody into a certain job, right? So it's like talking to the people at Tech Kids Unlimited, right? Like, you know, or whatever, you know, like learning what he's been doing there, using that to, and then all of, you know, observing and that. So like, and when we go into a business, so like the one thing about customized employment is like everything's on the table. Like we can reach out to supervisors in like any company and talk about, you know, tasks that would be a match, and taking this piece of a position and combining it with this piece and like creating a position that would be a match for him. So in that sense, I would say, like, in some ways, whether it's tech or really any industry, that customized employment allows that creativity and opens the door in ways that like maybe trying to pigeonhole people into other types of jobs that are already out there, you know, wouldn't be as much of a match yet.
Yeah, and I've not done this with tech, but I guess like kind of following on what Amy just described, like when I have had the experience of working with someone who has skills I don't have, and that not only do I not have, but I don't really know how to assess because I don't know that whole kind of field of stuff. So like, I don't know the difference between someone who maybe learned a little Java or something, JavaScript or something, versus someone who's like well equipped for a software engineering job at Meta. Like, so as Amy was saying, going to Tech Kids Unlimited or other places where they have learned these skills or used these skills and talking to people is a great way to sort of develop a barometer for like, where do these fit in the labor market? Like, you know, so that's definitely a big part of the discovery process. Learning where people are at in terms of skills that are important to them and where they can be plugged into jobs that are out there.
It's all amazing. I mean, what's not to like about the existence of customized employment with kids who have needed so much customized in their lives, lifetime to date. So very reassuring. Kind of takes the edge off it a little bit. We're going to try to find something working with these people that you really like. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a very universal concept, so I think that's why we all relate to it, you know. I think, but what customized employment, but there are people that need it to get in the door, and without it, that's going to be the challenge. And once they get in the door, they'll shine and show, you know, what they can do. But that's like, we have a lot of tools of presenting it as a concept to employers that I think are really helpful. So when we then present the person, they like understand like where we're coming from and all the, you know, how much we know the person that we're talking about.
Yeah. It's a really thorough and enjoyable process for everyone involved. I mean, to the extent that there's any, you know, drawback to it, I think some people who don't really get it at the beginning of the process, it can, you know, like 3 months before you actually apply for anything can seem too long to some people at first. But then when you realize what we're doing with that time, and really, you know, the depth with which we get to know people and how effectively that information can be parlayed into a job search that isn't just going online and applying for stuff, is really impressive and wonderful.
Yeah. it's worth the upfront work and the time.
Right. Yeah, it's worth the time.
Well, the cost is time. So
Right, that's
I can
right.
live with that because
Yeah.
a lot of other things are real cost.
Yeah, yeah. And then longevity wise, I mean, the examples that Kevin, people are on jobs a lot longer too, because you do that upfront. It's not a rotating door of,
Yeah.
jobs as well. Yeah.
Right. I don't know if there's any other questions, last questions for Kevin or Amy. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for this presentation. It was really, really helpful.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and I enjoyed being here.